If you have hair that grows away from your locks, have you ever wondered which repair method is best suited for your type of locks? Which method should you use to do that lock repair? I mean, for instance, we have locks of all sizes. We have small locks, like micro locks, we have large locks. Does every lock repair method work the same? Or are certain lock repair methods better for certain size locks? That's what we're gonna be talking about today. Let's get to it. Welcome back to the Atreyu Locs channel. Hi, I'm Atreyu, a semi-freeformer who is dedicated to bringing you the best tips to grow a healthy set of locks. If this is your first time, make yourself comfortable. I am glad to have you. So today I'm going to be shouting out Discovering Demi. She posed a question to me that I answered in the comment section earlier, and as I was answering, I started thinking about how a lot of people should probably know my response to this. Like, this is something that anyone who suffers from hair that grows away from your locks should know about. So thank you, Discovering Demi, so much for the question, because that has allowed me to make today's video. So let me just read Discovering Demi's comment. Thank you for educating us on how to manage the issue of hairs growing away from the locks. I watched an older video of yours showing the crochet method to incorporate the hairs into the lock. Do you still recommend this method? Now let me stop there, because before I went on to read further, I was immediately going to say, well, my favorite method, and I'm sure many of you already know this, is the braid technique, because I feel like it's the most non-invasive way to reincorporate those hairs back into your locks, right? It's kind of like you're working on the surface or the outside of the lock versus going in and, trying to mat up hairs. There's a certain danger when you do that, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later, so stay tuned. Continuing on, I have micro locks. Wow, she threw me a curveball. And have a hard time with the braid technique. It's probably operator error, LOL. I'm still repairing locks from going too long between interlocking. My locks thinned out terribly and I lost a few before realizing that my hair grows away from my locks. So I responded with, you're very welcome and I understand completely. I've never tried the crochet method on super small locks, so I just be careful, if you do try, to make sure that you're not breaking any strands while matting the hairs together. Because they're smaller locks, then that means that you have fewer strands and therefore less room for error. I might actually make a video on this topic. Hello. Thanks for the idea. I hope that helps. If it is a matter of user error with the braid technique, you might want to give it another go. The key is having enough hair that is also long enough to braid into the lock. Thanks for writing me. Hey, if you are enjoying this video, don't forget to smash the subscribe button and hit the notification bell so you are notified every single time I upload. How about that? So then that led me to think about, well, there probably are like certain techniques when it comes to lock repair that work better for certain types of locks than other locks. And so I would definitely say, if like for someone who has smaller locks or micro locks, I would try the braid technique first and foremost. And as I told Discovering Demi, the important thing is just not only making sure that you have hair around the lock, like hair coming out of the scalp to braid into the lock, but you also want to make sure that that new growth is long enough so that you can actually grip it with your fingertips and braid it around the lock. So sometimes you may have new growth, but it's not really long enough for you to grab without, pulling the bejeebies out of your scalp, right? Or it just may not be long enough for you to grab at all, right? To braid around the lock. Also, it could be that you just don't have enough hair around the lock, right? So maybe you need to wait a few months and let that new growth grow in, if it's gonna grow in, assuming you don't have a traction alopecia, and then try to braid it in. So as I was kind of telling Discovering Demi, I think it's important that if you have a smaller sized lock, especially, then you should definitely tend toward the braid technique because it's a less invasive technique for lock repair. The downside to using something like the crochet hook with smaller locks is that, as I was telling Discovering Demi, you have to go in there with the crochet hook and you're trying to mat things up, but you have to be very careful because while you're matting up the hairs, it can be easy to break hairs. And because it's a very small lock, that means that there are fewer strands. So you have less chances, you know, before you've broken off the lock. So that's why I say for smaller locks like micro locks, definitely try the braid technique. You just might need to wait to get enough new growth. Now for larger locks, I think you have more options. Obviously you can use the braid technique. I've used the braid technique on a couple of my biggest, thickest locks, and in fact it is this big and this thick because of the braid technique, but I still use it, you know, every so often when I need to. So the braid technique works with that, with bigger locks, but you can also use the crochet hook method as well because you have more hairs to work with. Anytime you use the crochet hook though, people, I'm gonna say, unconditionals, you should just always be careful. Now I know in the videos you hear, you know, and it's like no thing but a chicken wing, right? But you really can't see the damage that is going on inside that lock. So just keep in mind that, yeah, you're trying to mat the hairs, but you don't want to break them, destroy them in the process, right? Okay? Because that could compromise the integrity of the structural integrity, that is, of your lock, and then, you know, that could present you with problems down the road. Another method that I used to use back in the day before I discovered the braid technique and the crochet hook method was just wrapping that new growth around the lock. And you can try this. It's probably my least favorite technique for lock repair now that I've discovered the other two. And the reason is, depending on your type of hair, like your hair texture, the curl pattern, that may or may not work for you. What happened for me in my case, and for those of you who don't know, I have like fine hair, but I have a lot of strands of it. And so while it's like super kinky, coily kind of, there's a fineness to it. And so what would happen is I would spray the area with either distilled water with peppermint oil in it or rose water, and then gather that new growth around the lock and then wrap it around the lock. And eventually, usually even before it dried, it would retract back up towards the roots, thereby re-exposing that weak area, okay? And so that's why braiding those hairs into the lock is better, because when you braid them into the lock, they stay in place, versus, you know, when you initially wrap it around the lock, it covers the weak area, but it may retract up before that hair, that new growth, has time to mat up with the other parts of the lock. So it's a method, and I think it does work for some, maybe people who have hair that's even kinkier and you know, curlier than mine, you know, and I could see it working for someone who has just tons and tons of new growth. But it's like, if I'm going to do repair, then I might as well get it right the first time. And so I would always default to the braid technique, but that's for you guys to decide. So discovering Demi, thank you once again so much for your question. I hope that if my response wasn't clear enough, this video has helped to kind of solidify my reasoning in your mind. Good luck with whatever method you go with. I'm sure you will get your locks back on track. I've gotten mine back on track, and yeah, I had some pretty bad thin spots at one point, so just keep at it. And for anyone else watching this, let me know what methods you use to do lock repair, especially if you're someone who has hair that grows away from your locks. If you know of anyone who appears to be experiencing thinning as a result of having hair that grows away from their locks, please share one of my videos. There's so many people in the community, the lock community, who do still not know about this phenomenon. And I guess I should count myself as one of the lucky ones who actually watched Yanni's video about it. And you guys know she's not really all about techniques and, you know, talking about techniques, but she's spoken about it a few times, like maybe 2 or 3 times in her videos, like the braid technique. And so I happened to be watching those videos. I mean, I was watching all of her videos at the time, let's be real, but I heard about it, it resonated with me, and I applied it to my situation, and I haven't looked back. And I'm confident that if you have hair that grows away from your locks, the braid technique especially will help you guys out too. So yeah, leave me some comments. I love to hear from you guys, and I look forward to seeing you next week. you choose to love, do so unconditionally, because loving with conditions conditions the heart to not really love at all. This is Atreyu Locs, and I will see you next week. Peace.